But I just wanted to welcome everybody to our program. We have a special guest today. You don't have to listen to me talk for an extended amount of time, so that's a good thing. You can hear from George, who's going to tell us about Edison's Kinetophone films. But this program is going to be recorded for anyone who wants to watch it later. Everybody is, when I stop my sharing, I'm going to mute everybody and then let George share. But you can type your questions in the chat as you think of them, or hold them till the end. We'll all be able to chat together. So.
Ah, there we go. All right.
Everybody but me.
Well, there's not everybody's cameras on, but that's okay. Once we share, everybody will be hidden anyway. Just a moment. I'm gonna mute everybody, and then you'll be able to unmute yourselves. And I'm gonna give George, you're muted right now because I muted everyone. Let me unmute you, but you should be able to. There we go. Oh, I think you might need to unmute yourself.
How's that? Can you hear me?
There you go. Now I can hear you. Okay, so if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you.
Go right ahead.
So welcome to our program today. Today we have George Willeman, who hails from Springfield, Ohio. He graduated from Wright State University in 1988 with a BFA in motion picture production. Do they still offer something like that there at Wright State?
Yes, they do. They certainly do. They
I did not.
They have the Tom Hanks Center.
Oh,
now.
that's right. That's right. I knew that. In 1983, Dr. William Lafferty introduced George to a part-time job that would not only become his vocation, but his avocation, working with the nitrate motion picture collection of the Library of Congress, which was then housed in Building 167, Area B of the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. In 2007, George, who is now the Nitrate Film Vault leader, and the Nitrate Film Collection were shipped off to the new National Audiovisual Conservation Center in Culpeper, Virginia, where he now lives with his wife Felicia, his son James Ian, and 3 wacky cats. So I'll let you take it away, George.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming tonight. There have always been 2 places that I wanted to do this presentation, and one was at the Thomas Edison National Historical Site up in West Orange, New Jersey, which is where these films were created, and one was in Springfield. And so now this year I was actually able to do both. In February I got to go up to the Edison site and do this, and now I'm getting to do it here. So I'm all done. Okay. Well, anyways, I always like to start things out with a film. Let's just sit back and watch this little production unfold here. If I can get this working. What is going on here? Why am I not? Yeah, it worked perfectly yesterday. Hang on, I am locked up here. Why am I locked up? Why aren't you going? Let's try this one. Oh, that's not it. I apologize for technical difficulties. Why? There we go.
A few brief years ago, Mr. Thomas A. Edison presented to the world.
But you're not seeing anything, are you? You're not seeing anything?
No, we can hear, but
you can hear it, but you can't see it. Okay,
not...
hang on. I'm going to have to escape.
It looks like you have a cover over your camera.
Yeah. No, it's supposed to. That's the beginning of the film.
It's a map.
It looks like a paper sack over something.
Looks like a map to me.
That's the film.
Wow.
Looks like film grain.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's like slide 2.
Yeah, that's slide 2. Why isn't it playing? No, it's not going to play it. Dog. All right, we're just going to skip that. We'll go right on to the
It's working.
I know it works. All right, so this presentation is called So Amazingly Perfect, They're Really Weird, bringing sound back to Edison Kinetophone. This is a project that I've had in the back of my head for about 25 years. When I started at the Library of Congress, one of the collections I got to inspect early on was Thomas Edison's collection from his laboratory. And in there were a bunch of films that had very musical titles to them. I had no idea that he had done this, but in doing some research, it turned out that, yes, Edison had tried to do sound films way in the beginning and even in the teens, but there was no way to put them back together. So this is the project that we did to get the films together. Now, the title I came up with was not just out of my own mind. Here is a newspaper ad from Newark, Ohio, and if you look about 2/3 the way down, the line from the Chicago Tribune. So amazingly perfect, they're really weird. So the films themselves were born out of the Edison Laboratories in West Orange, New Jersey, and this is a building that you can actually go through if you go up there to see the Edison Historic Site. It's the main laboratory building. As I said, Edison tried early on to put sound with pictures. This is the Edison experimental film from 1894. Just a fragment of it survives. Let's see if it will play. It played yesterday. There we go. So the gentleman playing the violin was W.K.L. Dixon, who was one of Edison's right-hand men in the motion picture department, and he had been given the job of figuring out how to combine the motion picture camera with the phonograph. Since Edison owned patents on both, he wanted to find a way to put them together. This is where it started. It was not particularly successful, so nothing was done with it at that point. But Edison did continue trying to work with sound. Here is a sort of semi-fictitious drawing from a booklet, actually, about the Phono Kinetoscope, showing the inside of a theater. Now, one of the things I really like about this drawing is it was done by a cartoonist, R.F. Outcalt, who created Buster Brown, and who I believe was also a Buckeye. So a year or so later, they came up with the Phono Kinetoscope, basically a kinetoscope that had a film inside that would show about a 30-second picture, and they combined it with a cylinder. Now, they really had no way of synchronizing the two, but they would film subjects that would kind of go along with a certain song. This is an example of a Phono Kinetoscope film. It's not the original cylinder, but it's very close to probably what it looked like.
Spanish Dance La Paloma, played by the Edison Symphony Orchestra.
Oh, and it's not going to play.
Yeah.
All right, I'm disappointed.
I don't know what. Yeah, the video worked yesterday.
Yeah, so much for technology. Well, the pictures are working anyways. This is the studio in the Bronx where Edison shot his films. In being a historian, I'm always interested in do these things still exist? What are they used for now? So I did a little research, and this is what's there now. This is the Edison Arms Hotel. The studio itself burned down sometime in the late teens, early 20s. But it was a typical early motion picture studio, a lot of glass so that they could use sunlight rather than artificial light because it was less expensive. And this is the Kinetophone Studio. You see the lights there. If you look down in the back, you'll see a great big morning glory horn sticking out. There's a bit of a closer shot here of it. There is the phonograph up on a board above the actors. If you look at the short step ladder, the camera is behind that step ladder, and I'm going to show you a back view here, showing the camera set up, waiting to shoot. And here's a close-up of the camera sitting on its little table, bolted down, electrically operated camera, because they had to synchronize the picture with the sound. And if you look on the floor there, you see some cord on the floor, which basically tells the actors that's how far they can go, left or right, to stay within the picture. Now, while I was doing the reconstructions of these films, I noticed something in this particular one. This is a film called The Old Guard, and it's kind of a Napoleonic story. Unfortunately, the sound on this one is not very good, so we don't show it very often. But while I was working on it, I noticed something really interesting. If you look at the top edge of the picture, you'll see two little points sticking down like cat's ears. And let me show you if it will play. Come on, play for me. Man, I don't know if it's because all the people aren't here and there's just too much going on, but I can't get that to play. Let me go back. Back. I can't get it to do anything now. It's frozen up. Oh, yeah, it's not showing
It's
it.
playing, but without the. I wonder what's
I don't know what's going on.
going on.
Nothing has changed from last night except that there are more people.
Everybody, look away.
Everybody look away. Anyway, here's this. Those two little points you see sticking down is the recording horn from the phonograph. And so basically this is the first example of a microphone getting into the shot in a film, 1913. All right, let's move ahead. This is a shot from another film. This is the only kinetophone we have that was actually shot outside. And again, if you look carefully down in the lower left corner, you see a very large shadow on the ground. And again, that is the recording horn because the phonograph is sitting over to the left of the shot. And there's a white line. Again, there's a cord there at the bottom that is telling the people, do not move in front of this line because we're recording and you'll go out of focus also. Now, a couple things about some of the people that worked on this project. Alan Ramsey, who you would have seen at the beginning if it had played, was a Canadian actor who was hired by Thomas Edison to run the artistic part of the Kinetophone director. In the original Edison books, he is credited as the director on about half of the Kinetophone films. The Edison Quartet were all musicians or performers who recorded for Edison Records. They brought them in. They appear in about half of the existing kinetophones, playing different characters throughout. Cora Williams is in one of the films we're going to see tonight, if it plays, playing a maid. She also was the star of the Old Guard, and the gentleman in the picture of the Old Guard with her was her husband, and they did a lot of touring throughout the United States. Edward Bolden was a comedian and also an Edison studio actor, appeared in many, many Edison films, obviously chosen for these because he had a really good, loud voice. The Flugrap Sisters, there were 3 of them, and they all worked for the Edison studio. 2 of them became quite popular actresses in the silent era. One, Viola Dana, who is playing the Queen of the Fairies in the white dress, and the other one, little Leonie Flugraph, who became Shirley Mason, later on is playing Jack the Giant Killer here. And she also appears in one of the films that we're going to watch later. Their third sister, Edna Flugraph, never went into films because she didn't change her name. One of the most notable people that appeared in these kinetophones is Arthur Houseman. And if any of you are familiar with the films of Laurel and Hardy, Arthur Houseman plays a drunk in several of them. In fact, he plays drunks in lots of films. This was very early on when he was a comedian on Broadway, and they brought him in to fill in some parts. And you will see him in the film later on tonight. So here is the Kinetophone setup. This is what it took to actually show the kinetophone. Because you have the projector there on the right. On the left, you see the phonograph. It was a specially designed phonograph just for this system. And then on the table and under the table are all the little bits and pieces that it took to make this thing work. And synchronization was, of course, always the big issue and was not always able to be accomplished. The other problem they had was one of sound volume. Everything was recorded acoustically. There were no microphones. So they had to find a way to make the cylinders louder so that they could be heard better. So they developed this machine called the Hayam Amplifier. Basically, they would take the pre-recorded cylinder and put it on one of those, they're called mandrels, that they're in the front, and then they would put another blank cylinder underneath it, and using what's called a pantograph device, they would cut a wider and deeper groove in the new cylinder, which would effectively raise the volume of the cylinder. Here's an image from inside the Edison laboratory at West Orange, the room where they would do the cutting of new cylinders. You can see all the cylinders sitting in the little cabinet there, and the amplifier device set up on his little table, all ready to go to work. This was the heart of the whole system and was also the main problem. This was the Kinetophone Synchronizer. This device was connected directly to the phonograph by that cable that you see going off to the left, which was a linen cord. One of the problems they ran into in a lot of theaters, it turned out that rats and other vermin really liked the taste of linen, and they would eat the synchronizing cord. And once the cord broke, then of course you were on your own. But the idea of the synchronizer was, and the projectionist would have to stay and look out his porthole and watch the film, and if the mouth started going out of sync, he would take a hold of that black knob that you see there with the 3 little screws in the back, and he would crank it one way to advance the film 4 frames, or he'd crank it the other way to retard the film for 4 frames, hopefully bringing it back into sync. Now, the issue with that is that the way it's set up on the projector, he actually had to reach through the projector to get that knob, and right behind him, this black cone shape is attached to the lamp house. So he had a really good opportunity to give himself a really bad burn on his elbow while he's trying to adjust the synchronization. So here's the other end, the Kinetophone Synchronizer going to the phonograph. What is this not showing? Oh, yes. So the synchronizer, like I said, became the big problem for the system. And we can see that even within a month, they started trying to develop ways of automating the synchronizer. They put a device on it to signal from the projector to the phonograph. That didn't work. So they tried adding electric motors to the projector and the synchronizer and to the phonograph, and it still didn't work. The other problem was just that the issue of setting everything up. This is a letter from M.R. Hutchinson to Charles Edison, Thomas's son, who was kind of running the company at that point. I love the part where he says, "I've never come across anything as many angles to it as this infernal talking picture proposition. Dealing with theatrical people most unbusinesslike is the principal trouble. In addition to the very many angles of the construction of the machine and the constant changes I find necessary to meet conditions, cause me to have a perfect stream of engineering notices going to the works all the time." And he goes on for 3 pages about how much trouble he's having getting this worked out. And this is 4 days before the premiere in New York. However, Edison was pushing forward with this, and it was going to be the next big thing. This is an ad out of the Moving Picture News for people to get into, get into this and get it in their theaters. You notice, though, that it is not part of the Thomas Edison Company, which of course had its own film studio. It's part of American Talking Picture Company that was set up separately to run this whole project. I don't know whether that was Edison was hedging his bets, that if it failed, it wouldn't take him with it, or they thought it was going to be a great big thing and they were going to need a whole separate company to answer all the desire for more talking pictures. But they put out stock certificates. I mean, they were very, very serious about it. These beautiful posters are put out to advertise the shows all over the country. And the interesting thing I found out is that these films were not shown in movie theaters. They were shown in vaudeville houses, such as the Temple Theater up in Rochester. And you'll see the first act on their program is Thomas Edison's latest greatest invention, the kinetophone. So they're showing the two different productions, and then the rest of the thing is all live action. Now, I could not find where they showed in Springfield. I am 99.9% sure they did, because we were a big metropolitan area in 1913. And if they're going to show them in Newark, they're going to show them in Springfield. If they followed the idea of them being shown in vaudeville houses, this is where they would have shown it, at the New Sun Theater, because it was the major vaudeville house at the time. Well, the opening night came, and it was a huge success. They had a standing ovation. Everybody loved the films. They were so excited about it. They couldn't get Thomas Edison to go out on the stage because he was absolutely terrified. He was very, very self-conscious because of his hearing loss, of going out in front and talking in front of people. But you kind of see the handwriting on the wall already. If you look at the New York Times piece on the right, only drawback is when the talk falls behind the picture. And this became the big issue. So Why didn't the kinetophones last? They made over 200 of them within a year. One of the main problems was just the technical aspect of it. It was just too technical, and they could not keep the films synchronized. The projectionists of the time, who were already very well unionized, within a couple weeks, they decided they weren't going to put up with it because it took 2 of them to run the system, 1 to run the projector, 1 to run the phonograph, which was down sitting next to the screen, and they had to stand there and actually watch the films. And in at least New York State, you were not allowed to have electrically operated projectors. They had to be hand cranked. The idea of that was actually a law. The idea of that being, they felt that if a projectionist had an electric motor on his projector, he would load up a film, get it started, and then go out in the alley and have a cigarette, leaving the highly flammable nitrate film running by itself with no one to watch it. So they forced them to use hand crank projectors. So what you had to do as a projectionist, you're leaning forward, looking out the window, having to watch the film. You've got a pair of little ear tubes stuck in your ears. You're cranking away. You're reaching through, burning yourself, trying to synchronize the film back up. And within 2 weeks, there were reports that the whole system was beginning to fall apart because the projectionist would not put up with it. The other problem was the subject matter itself. Again, M.R. Hutchinson saying the public is interested in seeing talking pictures as a novelty once or twice, and then they want longer subjects and first-class acting. By 1913, a lot of the cinema language that is still used to this day was being developed. Close-ups, moving shots, special effects, all this stuff was coming in. And while the kinetophones were unusual that they had actual talking in them, there was no movement. You couldn't cut, you couldn't edit, you couldn't move the camera, you couldn't change the shot. So each one is 6 minutes long, and it plays like a theatrical performance, which, like I said, is really great if you're watching 1 or 2 of them. But you can imagine having an entire evening of like 8, 9, 10, you get really tired of them. The third thing was this sort of family quarrel that came about in Europe that pretty much eliminated Edison's European market. He did send a crew over to Europe to shoot a lot of opera sequences. Sadly, as far as we know, none of them have survived, except maybe a few cylinders are up in an archive in, I believe it's Sweden or Norway. And last but certainly not least, the entire Edison facility burned in December of 1914. Edison was able to rebuild very quickly. I think by the spring of 1915, they were back up and running, but the kinetophone department was gone. Interestingly enough, I've been told that the building where the kinetophone department was not affected by the fire. I think they just realized that they needed to cut their losses on it and move on. So now we come 100 years from there to the Library of Congress and the Thomas Edison National Historic Park getting together to reconstruct these films. This is an actual kinetophone print that we hold here in Culpeper. This is from the film The Edison Minstrels. Here's what the film actually looks like. This is a shot from the film. What's interesting about it is that this print was made in the mid-1930s, like 20-some years after the film was originally shown. We don't know why. We don't know why Edison's company was making new prints of the kinetophone films unless they may have had some sort of historical day even in the 30s, and they had a lot of the old crew back in, and they said, hey, let's get out one of the kinetophone outfits and play some of these films, and they needed new prints. So those nitrate prints that we have and negatives went up into our laboratory, and this is our laser graphics scan station. This is a machine that can scan film at 2K. It can do nitrate, it can do safety, it can do any size film that we have from 8mm all the way up to 70. And it is an absolute workhorse. And the great thing about it, it doesn't have any sprockets in it. So if a film is particularly badly damaged on the edges, it doesn't matter. It can still scan it. So on the other end, up at the Edison lab, they were working on the soundtracks. This is a Kinetophone Cylinder. And you actually will hear the cylinder if we can get the film to play. And they also have a few of the original wax cylinders that were recorded while they were shooting the film. Now, these are unusual. If you're familiar with regular cylinders, you know, they're about yay big. The Kinetophone cylinders are about this wide and about this big around. They're enormous, and they hold 6 minutes worth of sound. So up at the Edison, they have this device called an archaeophone, basically a high-tech cylinder recorder, and they made digital recordings of all the pre-existing soundtracks that went with the films that we have. Once they got them to Culpeper and I had reconstructed them, we sent the soundtracks up to our sound laboratory, and using this fancy program called Isotope, they went through and took out a lot of the scratchiness and noise, and I asked them to make sure that they still had this wonderful sound to them that they had, but take out some of the noise so you can understand what they're saying. For my part, I used a program called Final Cut Pro, which is made by Apple, and it allowed me to edit the films, both the picture and the soundtrack. If you look across the bottom, you see the blue line is the picture track, the green line underneath it is the soundtrack. Now, what was really interesting is that the films themselves do not run at the standard rate of 24 frames per second. They run at 16 frames per second. So I had to digitally slow the film down and then go in and match the soundtrack to the image. And it was interesting. I would get it matched up, and it would go along fine, and then it would just drop out of sync. And it did this several times, and I'd have to go back and cut a bit of the soundtrack and find a blank spot and just keep fitting it back in, showing that even with the best synchronization possible, the films and the soundtracks were never actually completely in sync. So there was no way the system could actually ever work like it was intended. It was just not possible. Some of the films were more difficult than others, as you can see by this soundtrack. The lecture film, which sadly you did not get to see, was a picture from one version and a soundtrack from a different version, because they made 4 or 5 versions of the lecture. Luckily, Mr. Ramsey, being an actor, was able to parrot back the words pretty much the same, so I was able to match him up pretty well throughout. But yes, there's always more. We still have some kinetophones that do not have their soundtracks, and we're holding out hope that they will show up somewhere. One of them is a film called The Politician. It's listed in the catalog as an Irish comedy. And basically the story, as we can figure it out, the gentleman on the left with the really smug expression is an Irish workman who is elected to his local government by the work of the gentleman in the loud suit and the mustache, who's a local political boss. And basically he has no idea what to do. The people gather around his window to hear his words of wisdom. He has no idea what to say, so his daughter reads them things from the newspaper, and then they start throwing vegetables at him. And it turns out she's reading the wrong things from the wrong paper. The other film that was a major find that we, again, hope that we find the sound for is called Votes for Women. Now, when I heard there was a film called Votes for Women and it was an Edison, I figured, oh, it's going to be one of those awful comedies about how silly the suffragettes are. No. In this case, the suffragettes themselves hired the Edison studio to shoot a 6-minute film where they would talk about what suffragism was and what they were doing with the big hike in Washington. Now, let's see if this one will actually play. Do we get? Oh, look at that. It's actually playing. How nice. So there they are. And this film is totally complete. And we've actually kind of talked about, if someone had the money to do it, of getting a lip reader to actually read all the dialogue and revoice it so people can hear what they're saying. Because of all the kinetophones, it's got to be one of the most historically important. Well, if you want to hear more about this or actually see all the films and the ones that you couldn't see, this is a cheap pitch for this. There actually is a DVD out. There it is. You can get it through Amazon. I would recommend it just because you're not going to find it anywhere else. All 8 films are on there, plus my presentation with the working parts. So I always like to thank the Thomas Edison Historical Society from West Orange for letting us use all these stills and providing the soundtracks. And that's all for this presentation. Now, do we want to do questions and answers now or try to show the films?
Well, George, do you want to try and I didn't know if maybe if you got out of the program and went back in, if they would work the little clips, but you had the longer clips if you want to show one of those, and then we can do some questions.
All right, let's see. Hey, I'm up for anything. Let's see if this is going to work. Where are they? Where is it? Okay, I'm looking for. God, it's not showing me. Whiteboard. Control. Why is it not showing? All right, I'm gonna do it this way. I apologize for this. I don't know why this thing is giving me such a problem. Huh. Okay, one moment, please.
George, I don't want to make you feel worse, but can we all take a moment to reflect on the fact that, you know, Edison was laboring with these to our mind primitive technologies to put these together, and we with all the high technology in the world are still stymied.
Oh, tell me about it.
Not your fault. We're all dealing with this these days.
I think the term, well, it worked fine yesterday, is going to become the next big T-shirt.
I say I don't think we should have tested it yesterday, because it would have been fine today.
All right, I'm gonna try this. Let's see if this works. Oh, come on. It's forcing me to add another device. My screen. Are you seeing a big black?
Yes.
Okay, you are seeing it. Okay. Let's see. You hear that?
Yeah.
All right.
A little.
Is it working?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Gather your family round your Sunday morning. Let the baby roll upon the floor. I'll give you one and all a timely warning. Never take the horse you from the door. Aha! There's the postman. I hope I get a letter today. Hello, fellas. Hello. Now, one for you, one for you, no, and one for you. Nothing doing. Good day, boys. There goes the postman and his tally-ho. 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 Tally-ho, tally-ho, tally-ho. So wise it is, the wise fine and Sunday morning. It is the joyous hunting day, the silly donkey morning. So to us and you guys, it's not for the hiding. Tally-ho, 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 tally-ho. Tally-ho, tally-ho, tally-ho. Then here's the glorious hunting day. Tally-ho, yes! Tally-ho! Say, Jim, things are pretty slow around here these days. This business is going to the dog. Yes, them automobiles that put the old blacksmith shop out of a job. I think you could make more money singing. Yes, but we'll have to run over a few songs before we can try them on the dog. Sure. They have horses on the stage. Why not blacksmith? Well, what shall we see? Let's try the Jolly Blacksmith. We are for jolly, jolly with mustard, stout, and strong. From early dawn till 7 o'clock, we toil all day long. We toil all day long. And for at times and living in the day, yet while I have all to hear, the jolly blacksmith makes a jolly flag in his sleigh.
She said, lean over with this big dinner pail and said that there's enough for all.
Ha-ha! Dear little Sally had the prettiest time in the alley. Of all the girls that all is so sweet, there's none like pretty Sally. She is the darling of my heart. And she lives down in our alley. There's not a lady in the land that is half so sweet as Sally. This is the darling. Can you play soldier?
Yes, I can play a drum.
And then we'll make you our little drum major. There was a little girl and a little fair drum, who knows that she when war will come. I'm not at all frightened, you understand, but if I am called on to fight for the land, you ought to be ready to play in the band. We are for flying flag.
All right, I'm going to stop the share there. There we go. I have another one if you would like to see it, but I know people might have some questions. So where is?
Yeah, I say if you guys have any
Oh,
questions. Here, let me.
No questions?
Well, I say I have a question about how long it took you to sync those. I can't imagine trying to get those to sync back up.
I'd say probably about a week on each one. Some were harder. Some, like I said, there were parts where they just would not fall into place, and I had to do a lot of cutting and cutting and cutting. That one I think only took about a week. the Musical Blacksmiths. Now, consequently, I've seen that film about 200 times. So I have it pretty much memorized. So you might see me like dancing along with it. That is my favorite of the 8. I don't know why. I can't even tell you why. It's just I find it delightful. I love the music and the little girl coming in, and I especially love the part at the end where he almost drops her, and he covers himself, and she's laughing, you know. And it's so wonderful that they, you know, because they couldn't reshoot, they'd have to start over from the beginning and shoot the whole thing. So I guess since he didn't actually drop her, it was okay.
Hey, George,
Yes.
I was watching some old Lawrence Welk shows. Now, they had a guy by the name of Kirk Ramsey on there. Was he a descendant of the Ramsey that was in these pictures?
That I do not know. The Mr. Ramsey is very, very. There's not a whole lot known about him. In fact, there are some Canadian theater people who've been doing a lot of research on what he actually was about and where because he was very kind of go one place and go to another, and maybe that wasn't his name or he didn't spell it right. So I don't know if he was related to Kirk Ramsey or not. Highly possible, but I'm sorry, I do not know. I can see if I can find out.
Well,
I will relate it back to Natalie.
I have another question. You said there was over 200
Yes.
films that were made, and you said something about a catalog. So did they put out a catalog like at the time,
they
or was
had-
it
They
done
probably
later?
did put out like advertising stuff for the American Talking Picture. We've gotten some listings from the Edison Historical site, of the films that were actually released, and there's about 200 titles, and a few of them, they had some celebrity people come in and do them. There is one with Andrew Carnegie. Andrew Carnegie. There was one with Thomas Watson, Alexander Graham Bell's assistant. There were some other famous people at the time. There were some famous opera sequences, bands, all sorts of different stuff. For whatever reason, a lot of them, the films themselves probably went up in the big fire because they know that the fire at the Edison facility started in one of the nitrate film storages. So why this handful managed to survive, we don't really know. And they don't even really know up at Edison why these actually survived.
So could there be some floating around around the country that people don't know what they have?
Yes, there definitely could be because, like I said, Edison sent these out everywhere. We know they played all across the country. An apocryphal legend that I've heard is that the last working kinetophone outfit was still being used as late as like 1918, 1920, way out in Wyoming or Oklahoma and like little backwater towns and cowboy camps and stuff like that where they could set it up and show them these films. The problem being, of course, is that if you dropped a cylinder and cracked it, that was the end of that one. And the film, The Prince Being Nitrate, if something went wrong and the print caught fire, that was the end of that. And of course, if the machinery broke down, there were no replacement parts for the synchronizer. So once you lost the synchronizer, even though it didn't work great, then you're totally lost and you can't synchronize the films again.
Most people were probably watching them unsynchronized no matter what.
They've probably, this is the first time they've probably actually been seen in sync all the way through. And when I was up at the Edison site in February, they had a Kinetophone Setup in one of their cabinets. What I found interesting, and I told their curator, they had the synchronizer like 7 cabinets away in another box. And I said, you really need to take that and attach it to the projector so people can see what it is. Otherwise, it just looks like this goofy mechanical thing with gears on it, and they've already got plenty of those up there. I mean, Edison developed several thousand goofy mechanical things with gears on them.
Would there be any way to run them again if you had the equipment?
Yes, sure. I even asked him about that. I said, hey, why don't we put this stuff together and actually show? And he's like, we don't use our material, they don't. So they don't run the machinery. But yeah, it's the projectors are very basic and they're 35 millimeter projectors. You could run a brand new roll of film on them, and the phonographs are easily fixed. I have several friends who repair, cylinder phonographs on a daily basis. So it would be costly to get a working outfit, but it's not impossible. I know of 2 or 3 that are out there. There's one at the there's one at Edison. There's one up at the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn that Edison gave to them himself. And there was one down at the Epcot Center in Orlando that I think was lent to them by another museum. And there probably are some other ones out there too, because there had to be a bunch of these things if they were showing them all over the country during 1913.
It'd be neat to see if someplace was able to sync them up and do a showing of them.
Oh, I would love to do that. I've thought about that too, but unless
I know we had a Magic Lantern show here years ago where they had an original Magic Lantern in slides, and that was really neat to see something like that. So
several collector friends who actually do that. They have hand cranked projectors that they've restored, and they will go out. Especially they love going to the elementary schools, and they will run hand cranked silent film shows for kids. And I would love to see that sometime too. That's the one thing. Until like 2 years, I've worked with nitrate film for 36 years. Until 2 years ago, I never saw it projected. Finally got to see it projected. And I always heard, they always talk about nitrate. Oh, nitrate, it glows on the screen. Oh, it's so great. And I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. Well, color film, yeah, it looks great. But black and white film in nitrate is the most glorious thing I have ever seen in my life. It does glow on the screen. They showed this film called Roadhouse with Ida Lupino and Richard Widmark, which, if you've never seen it, I highly recommend it. Find Roadhouse. It's this great, trashy melodrama. And Richard Widmark is totally insane, and Ida Lupino is beautiful. And they showed an original nitrate print of it. And it just glowed on the screen. And I was like, okay, I believe you. Let's move on. Great.
Well, do you guys want to see another one of the films?
I'll tell you a little bit about the second one we showed. This is another one of my favorites. This is the one true comedy that survived. And one of the most interesting things about it, it's one of 2 of the films that survived that both deal with deafness, which I find really interesting coming from Edison. Because, of course, everyone knows he had a very bad hearing, he could not hear very well at all. In fact, an interesting story I learned about Thomas Edison up at West Orange, they had a record company, of course. They put out the cylinders, and they also put out discs. And Thomas Edison himself would preview every single release from his record company before it went out. Of course, he couldn't really hear them. So what he did, he would put it on one of his phonographs. If you've seen an Edison phonograph, they're great big things. He'd put it on, he started playing, and then he would bend down and he would bury his teeth in the wood of the edge and listen to the music. So you can imagine walking into Thomas Edison's laboratory and sitting there with his teeth buried in the edge of a phonograph, listening to music. And they now believe that's one of the reasons why there were certain artists that didn't make it on the Edison label, because he didn't like the way they sounded. Well, he wasn't really hearing them. He was getting some vibrations, but he wasn't getting any of the quality of their voice. And eventually that caught up with him, and Edison's record company totally went down the tubes. And it was mainly because he was so unyielding and wouldn't let anyone else help, set up the artists and do that kind of thing. And they finally, Victor and Columbia and all the other companies just walked away with the business and left Edison to go. In fact, Edison's record company went out of business October 1929, right as the stock market crashed. So let's take a look at this one. It's called Jack's Joke, and this one has Arthur Houseman in it. And the neat thing about this one also, this came off of the original 1913 nitrate negative. So hopefully, as long as it plays, it will be absolutely gorgeous. Oh, now it's showing it. Let me see if this is actually going to work this time. Oh, look at that. Let's see if it plays. There we go.
Oh, just saw Mr. Jack coming up the stairs. Oh, dear. Well, look, tell him, tell him I'll return soon. Oh, Mr. Jack, Miss Beth has gone upstairs, and she will be down in a moment, sir.
Very well. Oh, come, buck up, old boy. What are you looking so blue about? Well, Detroit may be a bum town compared to New York. But of all the lonesome boys, this is the limit. 5 million strangers and you, my only friend. Well, I came here for comfort and advice. Ah, my boy, what you need is society. Feminine society. Now, a nice, bright New York girl is your medicine. You get the girl, I'll do the rest. What a chance. See, I won't do a thing to him. By Jove, an idea just occurred to me. There's a girl that lives right here. Oh, but she's too good for you. A fine girl, good fellow and all that. But she's deaf, awfully deaf. You've got to yell your head off to make her hear you. And she yells right back because she can't hear herself talk. Not much chance of sweet nothing, huh? No, but she has merit. A world beater on the taping beat. Why, her rarebit and spaghetti would make you leave home and mother. And my boy, she has a bundle of money. Why don't you marry this girl? Oh, I would. But she says that I'm too short. Stand up. By Jove, you're just about the right height. Besides, you're a good boy. Don't suppose you can hear her I come home late night. I should say not. Now, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll go and get her, and then I'll leave the short business engagement and get out, and give you two a chance to get acquainted. Well, put a daughter out to commit suicide. I'm lonesome. Gee, I wish that Now, you hide in there, and when she comes out, I'll introduce you. Now, here's some cigarettes. Here's a match. Go yourself together. Yes, no suicide. Right in here. I'll call you. Hello, sweetheart.
Hello, Jack. But why are you so late here?
Oh, I'm sorry, dear. But Ned Brown, an old chum of mine from Yale, is here. You know, he's a stranger in New York, poor fellow. He came here to have his ears operated on. And I thought you might entertain him while I keep the short business appointment.
Oh, but Jack, dear, I'm all alone.
No difference, darling. Ned is a fine fellow, and I'll vouch for him. Poor boy, he's terribly afflicted. Deaf. Stone deaf. Well, you've got to yell your head off to make him hear you. And he talks so loud that all the neighbors will hear your conversation. Oh, come now. You can't refuse to help me and a poor old pal, can you?
Oh, well, Jack, dear, if you put it as charity, I suppose I must.
That's a good girl. Now, kiss your sweetheart. Mr. Brown! Miss Adams! Delighted, Miss Adams! Now, I'll leave you two together for a short time. Business, you know. This is very sudden, Miss Adams. Jack's way. The most practical joker I ever knew.
Yes, he is too fond of jokes.
You're very kind. Most people are so cold as strangers.
You like it better when you become acquainted. Have you seen any shows?
Every night.
I should think you would enjoy motion pictures.
Why?
Oh, I don't know. One does not have to hear.
I should think you'd prefer the pictures.
Oh, no. I prefer concerts.
Indeed. May I get 2 front row seats for Susan's band?
For mercy's sake, what is all this about? This is a friend of Jack's who is as deaf as a doorknob. I'm yelling myself forth to make him hear. Mr. Brown, my aunt, Miss Larson.
Why, there's some misunderstanding here. I'm not the least bit hard of hearing. Am I to understand your niece is?
Oh.
Certainly not. I see. One of Jack's jokes. Can't we get even?
He'll be back in a minute. What can we do?
I know. He's going to kill and not lose his band either. How about you, Miss Locken?
Kindly excuse me. You two go. I will remain to welcome Jack.
Now, don't be too hard on poor old Jack. Good evening. Hello. Where are you two going? To the deaf and dumb asylum. Good night. Oh. Tongue.
And there you go.
That one was great.
That's one of my favorites. All right. Any other questions, comments, wonderings? Anything about the work that we do at the library in general? I'm open for anything. If you guys don't have to be anywhere, I certainly don't.
I'll say I have a theory of why he did. There's two that are the theme of being deaf, because you said they don't use microphones, so
Right.
they had to. So he knew that those ones would be loud enough for the sound to pick up the sound if they did.
It does
That's
seem
a
like
really good theory.
one of the most important aspects of being a kinetophone actor is having a really good set of chops.
Well, and I think it's interesting that, you were talking earlier about one of the reasons possibly that they didn't catch on was that, people enjoyed them as a novelty, but not as, something they wanted to. It seems like it wasn't necessarily that much different from, what they were seeing in a vaudeville show. It was just on film. But to us, it's absolutely uncanny that was possible in 1913, or to me it is. I mean, that's
one of the things I always find fun. The first time I put one together and got it to work, of course there was nobody around.
Yeah.
But it's like to see, your mind is so used to what film looks like from the teens, and they don't talk. So you see a film that still looks like a silent film, and all of a sudden the people open their mouths up and start talking.
Yes, that's
disturbing.
It's shocking, and yeah, I mean, the film quality was just so unbelievably crisp, and so was there? I'm sorry if you said this. I was walking in and out for a bit, but I mean, was there like any kind of like remastering work done on the scan, like to sharpen it up, or?
No, not really. The what you see is pretty much the 2K scans as they came off of the laser graphics, and not much had to be done to them. I would go in and maybe adjust the contrast a little bit to make them look a little better. But no, that's what you're seeing, especially on Jack's joke. That is the original negative. So it probably looks better than the film looked when it was in the theaters in 1913, because you're not.
Yeah, the original negative.
Print of it. It's the original first, the actual negative. And I wish we had more original negatives on there. I think we have 2 or 3 of them. All the rest are from prints.
And you don't see any scratches or snow.
No. Well, they weren't. Yeah. The negatives were not used very much. I mean, they only got used that one time, the one run for the kinetophones, and then they got put on the shelf and sat there for, 70, 80 years. And the only reason we ended up with them is because McGraw-Hill had merged with Edison back in the 40s, I believe. And they ran, McGraw-Hill Edison for many years. And then they decided they were going to get rid of the big Edison plant because it was too big and it was old. And they gave it to the National Park Service. So the National Park Service goes in there and they're going through the place and checking all the rooms out. And they come across this whole room full of nitrate film. And it's like, oh, this is not good. We can't have this here. So they contacted the Library of Congress, which of course very gladly took in the nitrate film. It's 300 or 400 reels altogether, and it's a very interesting collection because it is, I like to say it's divided into 3 parts. There are actual story films from the Edison studio. There are films of experiments, and then there are self-aggrandizing newsreel stories about how great Thomas Edison is. Lots of those.
Have you guys transferred all of those?
Yes. Yeah, most all of that has been transferred. Some of them are up on our website. If you like old films, we are building this thing on the library's website called the National Screening Room. I think there's about 500 titles up there. Everything, there's like what we're calling mental health films. There is the Edison Frankenstein, which we restored a few years ago. And the nice thing about them, for the most part, you can go up there and you can watch them, but you can also download them for yourself and have your own very own copy that you can do anything you want to with because they're all public domain. That's the one big thing about that. So we're trying to put more and more of that stuff up. We're doing a lot of work with putting out some of our stuff on DVD, like the Kinetophone DVD. There's about 20 or 30 different titles out now and more coming. We've got a group, if you're familiar with the actor Edward Everett Horton, who was one of my favorite character actors. Oh, he's so funny. We have a series of silent 2-reel comedies that he did in 1928 that nobody has seen since 1928. And the couple that I've seen are hysterical. So one of our accompanists who also has, well, he's put this out, we convinced him to try to do a set. He put out a Kickstarter to raise money to do it and had all the money he needed plus within 3 hours. So that is going to be coming out, and I think he originally was only going to do 5 of the films, but now he's going to do all 8 of them. And they're a delight. And they were produced by Harold Lloyd, although Harold Lloyd's name is not on them. So they are the quality of a Harold Lloyd film. And again, they come from very high quality material. And what's really funny is when you watch them, when he speaks and a title card comes up, you hear the title in his voice because you're so used to what he sounds like. So there you go.
Hey, George,
Yeah, that's
did Lillian and Dorothy Gish ever have anything to do with these films, or was they before, or did they?
No, they were both working by the time these came out. They did not, because they were both working for Biograph. And Biograph and Edison were big rivals, so I am absolutely positive that there had been no way they could have gone over to Biograph and said, could we borrow the Gish sisters for a day? No, that would not have happened.
Very interesting.
The biggest star that I've seen, I mean, who actually became a big star, is Viola Dana, who's at least in the Nursery Favorites, which if we had more time, I would show you. It's quite delightful. I mean, if you guys, how much time do we have?
It's up to you guys. I think I had this on there till we could go a little bit over normal to 8:30.
People leave when they get tired of.
Yeah, I'd say if anyone wants to watch another one.
It's only 5 o'clock here, so
I'd like to.
Oh, we'll show all this. Well,
I would like to see another one.
Okay, let me find Nursery Favorites.
So I have a question about when you see, because this is the first instance of there being synchronized sound with the video.
Yes and no. Before this, there were several different systems. The Gaumont company had one called a Chronophone, and what Chronophone did is they took a pre-existing record and they would have a performer lip sync to it. Basically, what we do now with film and videos, they had the performance was already there. They would lip sync to it, and then they had a way of synchronizing the two. And there are several of those still survive. And amazingly, a lot of them were done by a very famous early female director, Alice Guy Blaché, did a lot of the Chronophone films. And I've seen several of them. If you look up Chronophone on YouTube, you can probably watch them. Some of them are even in color. I mean, they're hand colored, and they're quite spectacular. But this was, as far as I know, the first instance where they recorded the sound simultaneously while they were shooting the picture. So it was actual live sound married to image.
George, I have a question.
Yes.
Marianne Nave. I graduated in the Springfield High School class of 1953, and we had a Willeman in our class. Could it have been a relative of yours?
That would be, if it was 1953, that would have been my Uncle Ed Willeman.
Yeah, it was, Ed. Uh-huh. Yeah.
He is down in Navarre, Florida, and he posts on Facebook almost every day.
Yeah, I saw him sharing the program.
Oh, really? Okay.
He was.
That's
Hi,
great.
he's not here. Oh.
My name was Marianne Ludlow, so when I graduated. So.
Well,
Hi, Ed, if you're there.
Yeah,
Thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. I love doing this. Hopefully I can come up with something else so we can do some more, because there's oh yeah, my mom there has The Dumb Girl of Portici, which
Love
is
it.
another film that I helped reconstruct. Yeah, yes. I send my mom all the things I work on. Because she and my dad paid for my education at Wright State, doggone it. So I want them to know that it paid off.
Plus all your car towings.
So
yeah,
maybe we could do, there was a time, I did once a presentation, there are a couple of my favorite comedy team, Clark and McCullough, who were both born in Springfield, and as boys ran away and joined the circus. And they were huge on Broadway. They were as big as the Marx Brothers when they were on Broadway. And when Talking Pictures came in, they started making films. Only a few of their films have survived. They're very bizarre. Bobby Clark's gimmick was glasses, but they were painted on his face with grease paint, which is, if you've never seen that, it is something to behold. They also were quite racy for the time, so they got in trouble with the code when it was enacted. But Paul McCullough died very early in like 1935, and so that ended the Clark and McCullough, and then Bobby Clark went back to the stage. But back years and years ago, before we moved to Culpeper, I did a presentation there on Clark and McCullough, and it was very well received. And I would love to do it again for this modern era.
Yeah,
see if we
I would say it was. I remember hearing about it, and I know we've got copies of some of the videos that you gave us to put in the archives. So yeah, would love to do something like that in the future.
So, and of course, Lillian Gish is from Springfield. W.R. Burnett, who wrote the screenplay for the original Scarface, is from Springfield.
Yeah, and his grandfather was William Burnett, who was a mayor here.
Oh, okay. Cool. All right. Well, let me see if we can watch Nursery Favorites, and I think you will really. This is another one of my favorites. One of my favorites. Okay. Let me see if we can get this to work here. Oh, look at that. Is this going to work? All right. Let me make that big, and let's see if this is going to play. And there we go. I'm going to mute myself so you don't hear it.
jolly old dynamite. A jolly old dynamite. A big old dynamite. A big old dynamite.
I am the queen of the fairies, and I'm going to cast a spell over the giants, a spell of joy and entertainment.
What do I feel? Well, I am happy, so let the dance go on.
Mr. Clary, quite the Clary, how does your garden grow? With silver bells and sparkle bells and sleepy little in a row. Oh, your face is very dear, it tells me all about your love. So promise you will ever be true, and be not your very love.
Down to steal our loan. Give me a lock of your hair.
I don't mind.
You call that a lock? Now that's more like a lock. But we are drifting.
Little Miss Muffet, stand on the tablet. Sing a perfect way. When it all takes a spider and stand up the spider. That's right, Miss Muffet, away.
Who is this perambulating parlor lampshade?
This is my dearest friend, the queen of the fairies.
And who are you?
I'm Jack the Giant Killer.
Oh, your highness, what do you say to a wee nippy? I don't mind. Just a drop.
A toast. May we always be friends.
Oh, jolly King Caesar, I spy and favorite king, and roll around comes the bees. Then oh, jolly King Caesar, I spy and favorite king, and roll and throw the money cup, and throw the money cup to me, and throw the money cup to me. Where is this old King Cole? This jolly old Cole? Here! I'm a cute little king, and my name is Cole, and these are my fiddler three. We are a fiddler three. I've been put down in books as a merry old soul, but that's all a joke, you see. I've caught the knife rabbit, I'm morbidly rapid, I'm filled to the muzzle with bile. Another man jested a thing I detest, and I've never been known to smile. All musical salads and popular ballads are set me to squirming in pain. If I find the offender a pick for the gender, you bet it won't happen again.
Oh, you bet it won't happen again.
No, you bet it won't happen again. If I find a young man who wrote after my name, a merry old soul is he. He'll have cause to be sorry he ever became a writer of history. If I find a young man who wrote after my name, a merry old soul is he. He'll have cause to be sorry he ever became a writer of history. A writer of history. Oh joy, let love forever reign.
There you go. Now you have questions.
Sorry. Okay. Well, I missed the setup for that, so I said it was fairy tales or something. But
Yeah, it's called Nursery Favorites.
Okay.
I don't really know any of those nursery favorites, but
having a house party apparently. And
So the-
sorry. So
the music.
So was that? Hang on. Well.
No, go ahead.
I just want to know, was it scanned from print or a negative?
that was from a print. The negative doesn't
Okay.
survive on that one.
Was that the one that they found later, or that was done later that you showed earlier? The one that was on had Kodak on it.
Oh no, that's the Edison Minstrels. The Edison Minstrels is another really good one. That one, the Library of Congress has to be careful with that one in today's atmosphere, because if you know anything about minstrel shows, they do have the two end men, Bones and Tambo, and they are in blackface. They're not as rude and vulgar as a lot of them. They're actually rather mild, but they're still, there it is. And on the DVD, in fact, they actually added a title about that, just a cautionary title for that one.
The sound on those, when there's music, are they playing is there another phonograph playing the music there, or do they have live musicians?
The orchestra is probably there on the other side. They're probably looking at the orchestra. I was actually wondering when we were watching that if they actually had two horns on the orchestra or on the film, so that they could catch the sound from both front and back, because it's really, really good in that one. I was kind of marveling at how good the music was recorded in that one and how clear it was.
Yeah, I was amazed that you could still hear the people talking. I mean, I would have thought that they would have drowned each other out, or that they wouldn't have
Well, a
had
lot
the
of them,
technology.
like I said, most of those people are performers and actors, and they know how to belt it out to get to the back of the house. And if you notice, the entire cast of the Musical Blacksmiths is in that film. The three troubadours are three of the blacksmiths. The giant is the bass blacksmith. Old King Cole is the fifth blacksmith, the kind of funny one that picks up Leone at the end. Leone Flugrath is playing Jack the Giant Killer. So yeah, it was a very close-knit family, probably because Edison wasn't going to spend a lot of money on a lot of different people. But like I said, the four guys in the quartet appear in a lot of these films. Anything else? Any other questions? Now, if you end up having a question later on, you think about it, just call the Historical Society and they can get it to me. I'm always happy to answer any questions about film history, or whatever I can, and if I can't come up with an answer, I'll make something up. It's always easy. I am a government worker after all.
Well, George, thank you so much for doing this for us and sharing the films. This was great. And thank you for the work that you did to get them restored so that we can see them.
It is absolutely my pleasure. I just knew that this was some little forgotten corner of film history that had to be out there, because being into film history like I am, so much of what is out there is incomplete, incorrect, or just flat out wrong. I mean, we have, if you want to talk about like color films, so people like, oh yes, The Wizard of Oz, color film, first color film. No, we have color films from 1920, and they're not tinted; they are in color. So I mean, there's so much out there that people don't know about, and thankfully, we're now, because of digital technology and the internet, we are able more than ever to get a lot of this rare stuff that we have out into the public. And more of it shows up every day. Just today, I came across an original camera negative to a 1915 Keystone comedy. We've had it for years. We didn't even know. It was under a re-release title. And I looked into it, and it's the original negative, and it's in really great shape. So hopefully we'll be seeing that one out here again soon. Stuff like that. You never see good material on those. Yes.
If we start at loc.gov, would that take us to eventually where we need to get to see the films?
You got to dig a little bit, but go to loc.gov, and there's a search bar at the top. Just put in National Screening Room. And while you're at it, if you like old music, we also have the National Jukebox, and there's like 30 or 40,000 recordings from the teens and 20s. Great, I mean, just great stuff. All sort of classical, jazz, pop, all from, you know, and they're all from old 78s from our collection. And it's just, and you can set up a playlist so you can just have it playing in the background. Unfortunately, with those, you cannot copy them because there's still, music rights are so weird and there's still copyrights on a lot of that stuff. But you do get to listen to them. There's also photographs. We have a huge collection of photographs, and a lot of them are up, and you can download enormous files that you can then, you know, make your own whatever you want to. You know, a lot of people will sell, you know, great big fancy blow-ups on canvas of some of our images. You can download them yourself for nothing and do whatever you want to with them. So it's a great untapped resource. I mean, a lot of people use it for research, but there's so much stuff in there that is part of the library that is yours for the taking. Books, there's a lot of books up there now. Comics, comic books. It's amazing. And like I said, in the films. So you'll be seeing more and more. The kinetophones are not up there yet. I think we were waiting until our friend was able to recoup his money on a DVD, but no doubt they will be up there pretty soon as well.
Well, we've filled in patches in quite a few exhibits with Library of Congress images.
That's what we're here for.
They come in handy, and I got to grab my copy of Frankenstein now. So.
Oh yeah, that one. Yeah, we won't even get into that one. We could do a whole presentation on that one. That is an amazing story. Holy.
Well, we'll have to have you back. Maybe in October.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe for Halloween we can talk about
that would be
silent.
great.
Let's think about that.
Okay. Well, thank you again, and thank you everybody for joining us.
My pleasure. Good to see you all.
And you guys